Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to spring. It's nice and snowing out for us. I know, and good morning, John. I think I know 90% of the people in the audience, but thank you all for coming out. I am not the moderator for today's panel. I'm going to introduce him in a second, but I'm up here. I'm John Marion from Common Cause, Rhode Island. I'm up here just to give thanks to a few people who made this possible. The Rhode Island School of Design, particularly Babette Alina and Pam Kimmel, give us this room as an in-kind contribution to our work, and so we just always want to thank them. I have to read this thing, which is that the emergency exits are there, and I think over here. And then also there are restrooms out in the hall if you go past the registration desk. And they ask that you please do not drink or eat in the auditorium. Common Cause has been hosting some events here for a number of years. We call them, you might guess, Demystifying Democracy. And this year we're excited because we're co-hosting one for the first time. So I think Ed's going to do it the same, but I will thank the co-hosts, the ACLU of Rhode Island, and I know Steve and Hannah and others are here from the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, and Jane and Susan and others are here from the League of Women Voters, the New England First Amendment Coalition, and Justin Silverman couldn't be here, but sends his regrets. Access Rhode Island, and Linda Levin is here from Access. And then the Rhode Island Press Association, and James is here from the Rhode Island Press Association. So thank you to them all for co-hosting these events. Some of the groups have materials out at the registration table, so if you didn't get the materials, you're welcome to, including the very helpful ACLU Know Your Rights brochures about the public records and open meetings laws that we're going to talk about today. And I will just make the pitch on behalf of all the groups. If you are engaged by these subjects, these groups all are nonprofits, and you can support them financially as well. And there's information about how to do that outside. Just two more things. We're videotaping today's event, and we'll put it online this week to make it available so that those who couldn't join us can watch it online. And it's going to be on, we've built a website out called creatively, demystifyingdemocracy.org. And so that has, we'll have this video and videos from all our past events up there already. And there's also a toolkit that Common Cause has built, an advocacy toolkit that you can get there. Finally, I'm just going to thank the panelists, Ethan Shorey, Amanda Milkovits, and Dan McGowan for joining us this morning. You'll hear their introductions from Ed in a second. And then finally, just thanking Ed Fitzpatrick, our moderator. Ed is the president of the Common Cause board at the moment, is also on the board of the other sponsoring organization, the New England First Amendment Coalition. He's the director of media and public relations at Roger Williams University, and prior to that, and teaches as adjunct in the journalism department there. And then prior to that, served as a reporter and columnist for the Providence Journal and a number of great upstate New York newspapers. He's a proud alum of the first round loser in the NCAA tournament, Syracuse University. So welcome, Ed. Yeah.
I had to bring that up. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for coming out on a cold and windy Saturday morning to talk about public records and open meetings. I'll explain my hand first of all. I was down in D.C. yesterday and tried to get a hold of the Mueller report. And the Secret Service, let's say, unnecessary force. Welcome to, this is the latest installment, as Sean said, of Demystifying Democracy. Learn from the experts, and we've got three of the leading experts in the state here today, how to use Rhode Island's public records and open meetings law. This is part of a Sunshine Week event. Now, technically, it's not Sunshine Week. That's over. That was March 10th through the 16th, but I like to think Sunshine Week is more of a state of mind, and you know, we definitely need more sunshine, more than 1 week per year. here in Rhode Island. Just to explain that, though, it was launched in 2005. Sunshine Week has grown into a really enduring annual initiative to promote open government and push back against excessive official secrecy. Sunshine Week was created by the American Society of News Editors, and is now coordinated in partnership with the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. As Sean mentioned, this morning's event's co-hosted by Access Rhode Island, the Rhode Island ACLU, the League of Women Voters of Rhode Island, and NEFAC, New England First Amendment Coalition, which I serve on the board with Amanda. You're in for a treat this morning because our panel members are on the front lines of the daily battle for public records and open meetings, and they really are, I think, some of the best journalists working in Rhode Island right now. Amanda Milkovits is a reporter for the Providence Journal. Worked with her for years, where she covers crime and justice stories since 2000. She's accustomed to battling police agencies over public records. I can tell you she's crushed a lot of 5K road races in the great state of Rhode Island over the years. Dan McGowan joined Eyewitness News Channel 12 in 2013 as a reporter where he covers Providence, politics, and education. He's accustomed to fighting City Hall. Don't let anybody tell you can't fight City Hall. He's proven you can do it, and he has spent many years as a baseball coach for the Mount Pleasant Little League team. Ethan Shorey is managing editor of the Valley Breeze newspapers. He began working there as a staff reporter in 2006. He became the online news editor in 2014, and he took over as managing editor in 2017. He's also one of the state's leading winter grillers. You'll see him grilling in the sun and the rain and the sleet and the snow. And he's probably grilling immediately after today's event. So just to start with Amanda, earlier this month, Amanda and her colleague Tom Mooney did a great in-depth front page story in the Providence Journal. It was titled Transparency Under Assault, Government Secrecy in Rhode Island. And they couldn't have been a better primer, a better table setter for tonight's event. So let's start with Amanda. Can you tell us what happened when former State Rep Patricia Morgan filed a request for information about how the office of now former Attorney General Peter Kilmartin spent $59 million in Google settlement money that it had received for its role in exposing a shady prescription drug marketing technique?
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Ed, for the introduction. For the Journal, we're going to be writing about transparency, or the lack thereof, in Rhode Island for over a year. So you look forward to that, and the reason is because there's just so much to write about. So we had Patricia Morgan, who was part of our story on a Sunday, and poor Patricia Morgan, she just wanted to find out how the Attorney General Kilmartin had spent $59 million in Google settlement money. And she received a memo that was almost all completely redacted. I don't know if we have that slide. It's the one that's a little forward here. It says it's a purchase order for label pins and challenge coins for the Attorney General's department. And the Attorney General justified redacting that because calling it a memo. Now, when the ACLU asked for this, they received the entire thing. Patricia Morgan is challenging this. Attorney General Nerona is going to review how this was handled. I mean, the problem that Steve Brown had really brought up is that judging this as a memo, judging other pieces of information as a memo, could mean that thousands of state and municipal documents that we normally receive would end up becoming exempt. This is a real concern, and the ACLU has called this something that could end up becoming one of the most significant challenges to the public's right to know. And one of the things under APRA is being able to obtain documents so that we understand what our government is doing. And the Attorney General under Kilmartin, Attorney General's office under Peter Kilmartin, had determined that this was something that was sort of a preliminary document. And that really wasn't the case once we got to see it.
Yeah, and just to describe, we don't have the slide, but the first version that you were given of the memo was almost completely redacted.
It is actually that you can kind of see it. It's the more forward document is what she received. So they did a great job with the marker.
But then...
And the one below it is the actual document that the ACLU received. Same document.
Yeah. And how did the ACLU get that document?
They asked for it.
And who gave it to him?
And the Attorney General's office gave it to them.
And the new Attorney General?
And the new Attorney General's office gave it to them, and I think the explanation at the time was the ACLU was a little more specific in what I was asking for, which, come on, it's the same document. And that's part of the thing, when we're introduced as experts, I mean, I think what it comes down to being an expert and using the access to public record, learning how to use public records is really just going after it over and over again. And all of us have stories of success. All of us have stories of beating our heads against a wall, trying to find a door, finding out it's locked, and looking for the window. And that's, I think, some of the things that we want to talk about here today is how you can find that window.
Speaking of beating your head against the door, let me just go to Ethan. And can you tell us what happened when you were trying to get into a public meeting in Pawtucket, a school committee meeting, right?
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you all for being here today and having an interest in open government. It's encouraging to see. Back in 2013, a lot of what we do at the Valley Breeze is to cover municipal meetings, school committees, the real day-to-day operations. And so I showed up at an alternate location for the school committee, which was the administration building. And if you know the building, it's deep in the bowels of the building where they actually have the meeting. So I showed up, door was locked, lights were off. I started ringing the bell. It was 6 o'clock in the summertime, so it was still light out. So I was there for about 15 minutes, and finally somebody came. The only thing I didn't do during that time was like go throw rocks at the front window, the second floor window. But what ended up happening was, instead of just admitting they'd done something wrong, it only ended up being a half-hour meeting. They challenged it and said that they tried to prove that I was lying and that I hadn't actually rung the doorbell. So they pulled surveillance photos, submitted those to the Attorney General, showing that they were trying to show that I hadn't actually pushed the doorbell. But when they couldn't get that footage, they decided to say how I was lying by saying that I showed up at 6 when I had actually shown up at 6:02. So, I mean, it was 6 months later, it was the same similar story. They held a meeting, another open meetings complaint, another finding that I was right. And 2 years before that, they locked out a guy who would later go on the school committee. So it was a pattern of behavior for them. I will say that they've improved a lot since then. But
And when you got locked out, what did you do? Did you file a complaint?
I did, yes.
And what happened as a
It
result
was a
of the
very
complaint?
simple complaint. I got locked out of the meeting, and I banged on the windows. I rang the doorbell.
You
And
filed it with who?
The Attorney General's
And what
office.
did the Attorney General's
Which
office?
anybody can do, by the way. It's very easy. I do most of my stuff by email. Nobody likes that, but I don't really care because it's allowed and it's the easiest thing for me. So they responded, and many, many months later, they came up with a decision and found that I was right, and there was no real punishment. It was just like, don't do this again. 6 months later, they did it again. So.
And what happened when they did it again?
That time I asked that it be found to be a willful violation because I had warned the school committee chairman that their agenda was inaccurate and that it wasn't a lawful discussion. And they ended up having an hour-long discussion about a switch to a new superintendent. The old one was going to stay on as a consultant. And I said, listen, man, I'm going to file a complaint as soon as this meeting's over. And he's like, oh, I'll have to check into that. And so they held a meeting, and the Attorney General's office determined that they said they went in for advice, legal advice, and the Attorney General determined that it was like 2 minutes of legal advice, and then the rest of the hour was just talking without me in the room. So they forced them to give me the minutes at least, and so I got at the story that way.
But did they find a knowing and willful violation
They did
in that
not.
case?
They did not.
How rare is knowing and willful violation?
Very rare. I don't even remember the exact reason why they did. I was like, please find this to be willful. The guy was warned, like by email, verbally, and they still found no willful. I think because it wasn't exactly the same as the previous violation. So I find very rarely that it's a willful violation.
Is there anything that you see that can be done about that? It seems like that could have been a case.
Yeah, I think just common sense, I think that could easily have, the guy admitted, the school committee chairman admitted that he had been told, and, I mean, what's more willful than that? So, a lot of it just comes down to enforcement and having a tougher stance, but it doesn't happen.
All right, thanks. Dan, your colleague at Channel 12, Walt Buteau, sought public records about a Seekonk police officer who resigned following an internal affairs investigation into alleged domestic violence case, and it turns out the officer was hired in 2018 by the Rehoboth Police Department, and after a 4-month process involving the Seekonk Police and the Massachusetts Public Records Division. Can you tell us about the documents that Channel 12 ended up receiving?
Yeah, so again, thank you for having all of us, and thank you all for being here. This is one of those examples where we don't want to be like Massachusetts either, right? Because